So Gamescom 2025 has just finished and Capcom has just revealed their brand new collaboration with Final Fantasy XIV. And boy oh boy does it look amazing. So in today's video I'm going to be showing you a few more details that you might have missed, along with some new information that has been revealed about the upcoming collaboration so you can know more about what you can expect to see when we get the collaboration. So with that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and let's get started. So first things first, the collaboration looks fantastic. Not only are we going to be getting a Chocobo skin for our Sacreds, which is just appropriate, especially for me personally, which traditionally ever since Monster Hunter World released, I have been naming my Palico Kupo, and then in Monster Hunter Rise I named my Palamutes Choco, which I also did the same thing here in Wilds. That is the name of my Sacred, which is of course short for Chocobo, and that is the name that I have for my Chocobo in Final Fantasy XIV. So it all comes full circle. My Sacred named Choco is gonna be a Chocobo and I'm very excited for it. I hope you're able to customize the color of the Chocobo. That would be fantastic, so I could have a red Chocobo or a black Chocobo. But even if it's just the base color, it's pretty cool. But of course, beyond that, the big highlight that we're going to be getting is Omega as the monster that we're going to be hunting. And that is a huge deal. Omega is one of the raid bosses from a series of raids you can do in Final Fantasy XIV, and he is this mechanical construct that goes up against some serious big deal monsters like Shinryu and Bahamut, and it's a really cool set piece that I think people are going to enjoy it, even though it might not really fit the vibe of Monster Hunter. But given that we do have constructs in Monster Hunter, that is likely the type of monster that Omega is going to be classified as. Now this Omega is going to be called Omega Planich or Planetis or Planetes. I'm not really sure what that implies, but one key thing to note is that for one, it's going to be released at the end of September as part of Title Update 3, but they do mention it as being an additional monster, so I expect that Omega is not going to be taking up a slot of a monster that is going to be released in Title Update 3. This will be in addition to what's already coming in Title Update 3, at least if I'm understanding this right and the way that they have written this, so I am excited to also see what that other monster is going to be. Now another cool thing about Omega is that it more likely than not is going to be a raid boss, that is to say a hunt that you're meant to take on with other players, much like we did the same back in the 2018 collaboration between Monster Hunter World and Final Fantasy XIV, where in that game we got to hunt Behemoth, and it was pretty much just like the Final Fantasy XIV encounter that you fight against in the Crystal Tower raid, if I'm not mistaken, where you have a lot of these mechanics. You need to have a tank that draws the aggro of the monster. He would summon these tornadoes then depending on the tank's location, so if Behemoth was targeting you, you would need to make sure that you would stay far from the party and place those tornadoes away from the action so that people wouldn't get messed up, and then he would make these comets fall from the sky and you can stand behind them to avoid getting one shot by his big attack, though you always had to be careful that Behemoth would not come close to those rocks because he could also destroy them. In my opinion, it's one of the best encounters in Monster Hunter World. I think that it was extremely challenging in the extreme version, and the cooperative aspect of it was fantastic. It just made for a very memorable fight, though I do understand that a large portion of the community doesn't like these siege fights, especially in the case of Behemoth, where you relied a bit more on your party by having these new mechanics. So they may just do it in a way that Omega can also be soloable, or maybe you can bring the NPC hunters with you, so you can have Fabius, for example, helping you out. I for one am very curious as to how this is going to turn out, though of course we're not just going to be getting Omega and the Sacred. It's also fair to say that we're going to be getting a new armor set and potentially multiple weapons. In the case of the World collaboration, we got the Draken armor, which took on the iconic appearance of the Dragoon armor from Final Fantasy, and we also got an insect glaive which just fits perfectly with the Dragoon vibe. So maybe we get something along those lines here, like we could potentially get a Paladin's armor with a sword and shield, or maybe they give us the Viper armor set with some cool dual blades. Another potential item that they could add to the collaboration is a little costume for your Palico to make him look like the small little Chocobo named Alpha, which is a big part of the Omega raid questline, and I think it would just be appropriate to have that as an additional costume. Now that is pure speculation, so let's move on to the official Capcom website to see what else they have to say about the upcoming collaboration. So here we have the official page, a special collaboration with Final Fantasy XIV Online. The hit MMORPG boasting over 30 million adventurers is coming in Title Update 3 and is scheduled for release release at the end of September 2025. And here we can see Omega right here, and I really like these screenshots here. Look at the detail of Omega, though I would expect him to be much larger, honestly, especially because I believe he is a 16 player raid in 14. This kind of makes him look a little bit smaller than I expected. Anyways, introducing Omega Planetus as an additional monster. Having descended into the Forbidden Lands, the Omega frame now bears a new name, one that sets it apart from others. So it looks like we're gonna fight it in the ice map that we already have in the game. I can't really remember the name of the map off the top of my head, but yeah, this definitely looks like the map that we already have in the game. We also didn't get a new map when Behemoth was added to Monster Hunter World, so that's to be expected, but again, I just kind of expected them to be a bit larger. Iconic creatures from the Final Fantasy series such as Chocobo and Cactuar will be featured alongside a variety of additional collaboration content, hence why I was speculating earlier about what else we would get. So here we can see the Chocobo in full detail. It looks amazing, I love these little birds. Ever since Final Fantasy Tactics, I've been a huge fan of the Chocobos, and again, I have named my Sacred and my Palamute Choco in honor of these guys. I also like that we're going to be getting the Cactuar again, in case you didn't play the collaboration in Monster Hunter World. The Cactuar was also present in that game, and the way it worked is you could hit them, much like you can hit a Paratoad for example, and it would start spinning around dealing 1000 damage, as that is a thing that the Cactuar does in the Final Fantasy games. It always deals 1000 damage, so it would deal that multiple times against a monster using 1000 needles, and it would just deal a lot of damage, so it was pretty overpowered if you were able to bring a monster near the Cactuar, though they only spawned in the Wildspire Waste and they weren't a guaranteed spawn, but if you could get it to spawn, it would be a huge help on your hunts, because these guys would actually show up on the map outside of the Final Fantasy collaboration quests. So I know some people aren't a big fans of these collaborations because this ruins immersion and whatnot. Well, you're gonna have to deal with Cactuars in the desert. And of course, again, we get to see a better look at the Chocobo, the hunter riding it, in comparison to the Sacred. Pretty cool stuff, and they go on to simply advertise Final Fantasy XIV here. So I'm just incredibly excited about this upcoming collaboration. I had this pretty funny tweet that was actually getting pretty viral in the community about how Omega is just gonna be spamming his moves and one-shotting all of us, much like Behemoth did back in World. But regardless of what's gonna happen, I'm pretty excited about this. Funnily enough, I've been getting more and more back into Final Fantasy. I have just started to get into Magic the Gathering as the Final Fantasy set was released. I got a commander deck and a couple of boosters, and it's just been really fun to get into the spirit of Final Fantasy again. I haven't played 14 in many years. I didn't even do the Omega raid. The point that I'm at is just before the Shadowbringers expansion, so I can go back and do the Omega raid, which I have yet to experience. So I might do that before the collaboration. We'll have to wait and see, depending on how free I am going to be, because Final Fantasy XIV is a huge time commitment. On that note, I saw this pretty funny tweet regarding the instructions on how to get the contents of the Monster Hunter Wilds and Final Fantasy collaboration on the side of the Final Fantasy XIV game, and the instructions are basically start the game and make your character, and then reach level 100 and complete everything up until the end of Dawn Trail, which is pretty insane. We're looking at hundreds of hours of content to play through, which is pretty hilarious. Now, on the other hand, the Final Fantasy XIV players are going to be getting Guardian Arkveld, which is to be expected. Arkveld is the flagship monster of the game, of course. They're also going to be getting a new Palico as a pet that has the default Palico armor from Monster Hunter Wilds. They're likely going to be getting the default Hunter armor from Wilds as well, and some more stuff. Maybe they'll actually get the Rathalos armor this time around in that game, because back when Final Fantasy got the collaboration, on their end they got to hunt Rathalos, and it was a really cool event, and you would get a Palico and a Poogie, and you could use Rathalos as a mount, which by the way, Final Fantasy XIV players are also getting Sacred as a mount. But for whatever reason, they decided to give the Final Fantasy XIV players a completely different Rathalos armor set that honestly looks nothing like the Rathalos armor that we have in the Monster Hunter games, which never made any sense to me, despite the armor actually looking pretty cool. So maybe this time around they'll get the Rathalos armor set, maybe the Guardian Arkveld armor set. That one is also pretty cool. Either way, I'm sure it's gonna be a lot of fun to hunt Arkveld in Final Fantasy XIV, much like Rathalos was, because as a Monster Hunter player, you're going to come in and you're going to recognize a lot of the mechanics and tells of the monster before they do an attack, and that is going to feel very rewarding, as you see the Final Fantasy XIV players that haven't fought against these monsters are going to get hit by everything because they don't have the indicators telling them that they are going to get attacked. So either way, I am very happy about this. I am the target demographic for this kind of collaboration. That said, I've always been a huge fan of the Monster Hunter collabs all the way back in the PSP days, and I know a lot of people dislike these collaborations, especially these bigger ones where they add a monster, because again it kind of ruins their immersion, but I'm just used to having over 15 years of experience with Monster Hunter where they have all kinds of collaborations, so I just get to enjoy them and have fun, and I cannot wait to get my hands on this. That being said, let me know how you guys feel about this collaboration, and do you think that Omega is gonna be more difficult than Behemoth? Because that is the real question here. With that being said, my name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!